Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. This presentation was brought to you by the Vigilant Society of Engineers. I thank you for giving me the opportunity to share it with you and to all electrical working professionals in the field. This presentation focuses on equipment working space and we're going to use a national electrical code to describe how working space is acquired for electrical equipment. Now the space is about the equipment. The space is about the equipment is required the following, and that is the workspace, which is the space outside from where the equipment is laid down. And also clear space, meaning nothing should be obstructing that space for which work is going to carry it out. And also equipment should provide illumination. More so, illumination should be available over the equipment. And there should be electrical or dedicated equipment space. So that is a space where you're going to place the equipment, right? And beyond that, the equipment should have an housing so as to provide protection for the equipment. It may also include just an enclosure for the equipment. Therefore, no such room or housing for the equipment is provided, but an enclosure for protection. So the working space. The working space is that space outside where the equipment is laid down, right? That is what we refer to as our safe space. And the intention is to protect personnel who work in the vicinity of the equipment without jeopardizing safety. Why should we maintain working space? Now, equipment operating 600 volts or less to ground is likely to require examination, servicing, and maintenance. So, an example of equipment that need examination and services are panel board, switchboard, circuit breaker, control, heating, and air conditioning equipment. All right, so there should be safe space to carry out maintenance work for these equipment. Now the dimension of the working space. This dimension shall comply with 110.26 of Article A1, A2, and A3. This we refer to as the depth of working space, the height of the working space, and the width of the working space. Particular attention must be paid when it comes to dimension of working space. How much space are required to maintain? The depth of the working space shall maintain about the distance in the direction of the life parts or the enclosure of the life parts. For table 110.26, the minimum clearance that we're supposed to maintain about 0 to 150 volts under condition 1 and 2 is 3 feet and 3 respectively. And the minimum clearance we should maintain about 151 volts to 600 volts is 3 feet under condition 1, 3.5 feet under condition 2, and 4 feet under condition 3. The condition 1 represent the exposed life parts on one side of the working space within 3 feet, right? And that is when the voltage level is at least 0 to 150 volts or 151 volts to 600 volts. So for condition 1, we should maintain a depth of 3 feet at these voltage level. For condition 2, where there's exposed part or live part on one side of the working space and grounded part on the other side of the working space, that is within 3 feet, the voltage level would be 0 to 150 volts and 151 volts to 600 volts. At this level, we said the minimum clearance should maintain 3.5 feet. Where condition 3 is concerned, exposed live part on both sides of the working space would require a maintained distance of 3 feet, where the voltage level is 0 to 150 volts, or 4 feet when the voltage level is at minimum 151 to 600 volts. In Figure 2, this is an illustration of the standard workspace requirement for us to maintain. The width of the working space is that space that is required before the equipment so as to allow personnel to operate on the equipment without any hindrance. So the width of the working space shall be the width of the equipment, or 30 inches minimum, whichever is greater. The working space shall require 90-degree opening of the equipment door, or in case there's an inch panel. The height of the working space that represents the area in which the work is being performed. The working space shall be cleared and extend from the floor or the platform to a height of 6.5 feet of the equipment, or the height of the equipment, whichever is greater. Equipment incorporated in the height requirement located above or below the equipment must not extend 6 inches beyond the front of the equipment. So any such equipment that is located on top of another equipment, which is a part of that equipment that is going to be worked on, that equipment located on top or below should not extend beyond 6 inches to create an obstruction. Where does working space may not required? Working space is required for the safe operation of equipment. However, in a case where there is low voltage source, perhaps smaller working space is required. And so equipment operating at 30 volts, 42 volts, and 60 volts may require smaller spaces. And where there's a dead front assembly, that perhaps not need any form of space to work. Therefore, non-energized assembly, such as the back or the side of the assembly, does not need working space. And in this case, an equipment can push through a wall or push against another equipment, since there is no space required on that assembly. Now, where rear access is required for non-electrical maintenance, there should be at least a 30 inches minimum working space that should be maintained. And so in some cases, we may need working space, while in other cases, we may not. So special assessment must be done for your equipment when you're positioning it, since there might be no working space or working space for that equipment. Next one we're going to look at for working space is clear space. Now you have a working space, you need clear space, right? So You must not have any form of storage within a working space. So, person performing electrical maintenance can easily carry out their work without any form of obstruction. So you must not have any form of obstruction in such space. In an event where equipment are subjected to inspection, servicing, and maintenance, clear space must be maintained. So it is very important that personnel who are not operating on equipment or who are operating within the vicinity of electrical equipment respect the rules that no storage must be left in the working space for which those equipment would have required maintenance. So guys, hit that subscribe button for more videos. Thank you. So entrance and egression from working space. At least a minimum of one entrance and egression point should establish for working space about electrical equipment. And this is to provide maintenance and inspection on that equipment. Now for large equipment, 1200 ampere or more, 6 feet wide, that contain overcurrent device, switching or control devices shall maintain entrances and egression on both ends 6.5 feet high or 24 inches wide. In the case where it's a large equipment, it is acceptable to have a single entrance and egression from the required working space, so long that there's extra working space about the equipment. When we consider equipment space, we look at it from the perspective that the equipment should be able to fit in that space. And so that equipment is required much of adequate space so that there's no obstruction or there's no damage can done to that equipment. So for outdoor insulation, it shall comply with 110.26 E, A, and B for where equipment insulation is concerned. Now, insulation requirement. Outdoor electrical equipment shall be installed in a suitable enclosure and shall be protected from accidental contact from unauthorized personnel. So a dedicated equipment space should be available, and such space should occupy the width of the equipment and the depth of the equipment, and the space should be available from the grade to the height of the equipment, and no obstruction should be required within that space for which the equipment is going to lay down. Equipment space. The equipment requires space to be laid down. The space should be free from any obstacle or obstruction. And as far as that is concerned, the dedicated equipment space for switchboard, switchgear panels, motor control centers shall be located in that space and protected from any form of damage. For indoor installation, there should be a dedicated electrical space within your equipment space. So where you gotta pull in pipes and bring in wire, you should have dedicated electrical space. And this is a space that is above the equipment, say from the floor to the height. And it's a measure of the depth and the width of the equipment. It may also cover the floor to the ceiling height. The flooring system above the equipment shall contain protection, therefore providing protection against leakage or breakage in your piping system, and a sprinkler protection may be required where it complies with the piping requirement. When it comes to electrical equipment, room or enclosure, it is very important that only authorized personnel are allowed to have access to those equipment. Therefore, equipment enclosure and room require to be locked to prevent unauthorized access, that is from persons who are not going to perform maintenance or service or inspection on those equipment. Such room or enclosure housing electrical apparatus are considered to be accessible if qualified personnel have access, that is, to those equipment. It is so important that we ensure that the space for which work is going to take place is properly illuminated. And so we try to install lighting fixtures in the area to provide enough coverage for lighting. So illumination shall be provided for all working spaces about service equipment. That include switchboard, switchgear, panel boards, or motor control centers. Additional lighting receptacle shall not be required where the workspace is illuminated by adjacent lighting. Therefore, if you're going to lay out one equipment beside another equipment that is already being illuminated, then you don't need another additional lighting. So illumination shall be provided in the working space, and if there's already illumination in about that space, then you don't need any additional illumination. So that's just take care of that new equipment being installed. Okay guys, thanks for your interest in this presentation. Stay tuned for more, and make sure you register to our engineering platform at the Vigilant Society of Engineering.com for more information on space about electrical equipment.